everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 619. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources. And joining me on the line from about 5 miles from here, it's the original co-host of Limited Resources, Ryan Spain. Ryan, welcome back on the show.
619 episodes? I only remember like 85, 90. Yeah. I don't know. I think you better check those numbers, buddy.
I know. I have a website that you can go to check on him if you want. Yeah. Right. The fact that this show still exists, I think, would have absolutely floored either of us when we started it like in 2009.
I knew.
Oh, you knew? Oh, wow. Well, it's funny because once you got your job at Wizards, I was ready to bail on the thing. I was done. Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to do the show with anybody else.
I remember those conversations. We had a long talk about the future of LR given my departure. And hopefully I was one of the ones saying, don't just pull the plug. At least see, at least see where you can take it and who you might consider. And
I remember you said that, I think that what we thought of at the time was that the mission that we kind of created at the beginning of it was actually working. Like people were listening. We got a lot of feedback from people saying that it was actually helping them. And it was like, it really would have felt bad to dump it. But for me, it was like the show was you and I. Like I don't want to do the show with somebody else. And it turns out I can, like Laux was great.
You'll learn something.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I definitely had to be kind of shoved along. Anyway, Ryan, it's awesome to have you back as always. I love having you back on the show. We're going to be getting into some pretty interesting stuff today. We're going to go broad strokes on getting better at Magic and the tools that we use to get better at Magic. And especially historically speaking, we're going to go over kind of the landscape and what it looks like now, and even where we may be going in the future, and how you as a listener can use that to your advantage. Before we get into our main topic, got to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. That's right. They're a marketplace now. And that means that they sell singles on behalf of other people. So like if you go and type in a card name, you're going to see a list of these cards pop up that aren't only from Channel Fireball. Now they're from other stores. So, you might be able to shop by price, or you might be able to shop by reviews of the seller, or even the condition of the card. If you're somebody who doesn't mind a beat up card, especially for the old stuff, you may be able to find a good price on an older, heavily played or moderately played version of the card instead. And that's good for you, right? That means, no one store can provide the level of stock that a grouping of stores can. And that's what the marketplace is all about over at CFB. Also, they're still in the middle of Marketplace Madness. It's coming to an end soon, but you can still get in on it. If you head over there, you can check out the prizes and stuff you can get from Marketplace Madness. If you do end up picking up anything over there, if you'd use the affiliate code, there's a little box at checkout. You can just put LR in there. And basically that lets them know that we sent you over, and it helps out the show. So we appreciate it if you could do that. The show's also brought to you by FTX. FTX is the regulated, safe, secure way for you to buy and invest in digital assets. Primarily things like cryptocurrency. NFTs are starting to become more and more of a thing. And then there's a whole bunch of other kind of financial instruments on the horizon as well. If this is something that you're interested in, you should keep them in mind. I would never push anybody to go invest or do something like that if they didn't feel well educated and kind of had their feet under them on it. But when that time does come for you, we hope you'll think about FTX as the place to go. If you're in the US, it's ftx.us, and if you're outside, it's ftx.com. Of course, I'll remind you that I'm not a financial advisor in any way. And if you do want to do investing really of any kind, honestly, you should definitely consult a financial advisor first so that you understand the ins and outs of what you're doing. Now, the last thing, of course, is the Patreon. The Patreon is the backbone of this show. It is how this show still exists for all those years that Ryan and I just talked about. And I want to say a big thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. It really does mean the world to us. Thank you. it's really great that you're here and that you've kept the show going, and you can kind of give yourself a pat on the back. We really appreciate it. Of course, one of the many perks that you get for being a patron is you can ask questions on the Patreon question of the week thread. This one comes from Cole, who says, Marshall, if you were to be a commentator for a sport or game other than Magic, what would it be? Would you take the color commentary perspective of the audience or the expert? Which is a funny question. So what's the answer to the first one, Rye?
NBA. I was going to try to do my best Kevin Calabro, but I just didn't want to butcher his legacy. So I just decided to bail on that.
I would get on that magic carpet and ride. No doubt about it. Kevin Calabro, really one of my commentator heroes. He was play-by-play announcer for the Seattle Supersonics, which were once again cold and ruthlessly ripped away from our city. In 2008. So yeah, it's been a really long time now, 13 years since we've had a team. But anyway, Calabro was widely considered the best NBA play-by-play announcer. You know, for at the team level, at least he does work for NBA TV now. I would totally love to do that. I know a lot about basketball. I've played my whole life. I played yesterday, played in high school. I'm old now. I've it's really, I have one tattoo. It is a basketball. It's part of my identity as a person. When I'm buried in the ground, if there's a basketball with me, I probably wouldn't be shocked.
I learned Marshall has a tattoo, by the way.
Yeah. And
when did that happen, and why didn't I hear about it?
I was 21 or something.
That's why we weren't deep friends yet. That's funny.
Yeah. It was just a really long time ago. But anyway, but basketball is really my thing. So that's what I'd want to do. To answer the second part of your question, Cole, this is a really common misconception that people have about Magic commentary and about all types of commentary. It may just be a naming thing, but it's kind of important. So Cole asked if I would take the color commentary perspective of the audience or be the expert. And interestingly, the color commentator is the expert. The color commentator in sports is normally somebody who has played the sport at a professional or very high level. It's often a Hall of Fame player or maybe a franchise player, for that particular team that will go alongside what we would call the host or the play-by-play commentator. And that's the person who brings you in and out of breaks. Hey, welcome back. We're doing this, that type of thing. And also calls the action, blah, 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 passes the deer. Oh, he makes a big shot, right? Mike Breen is the number one guy for the NBA, for example. And if you look at who sits next to Mike Breen, it's two people who were involved in the sport, right? It's Stan Van Gundy. He was a coach, and it's Mark Jackson. He was a coach and a player. And, these are the experts, if you will, right? These are the people who are giving you that inside track of, no, he should have done this, or they should have ran this play, or this was a mistake, or whatever. That because the play-by-play commentator, Mike Breen, I don't know if he played a little bit of hoops, but he certainly wasn't an NBA player. And so he doesn't have credibility. He doesn't, even if he's right, he doesn't have the credibility to say, well, this coach made a huge mistake here. They shouldn't be doing that. But Mark Jackson does. Right? Sam Van Gundy does. And so that's what you want. And obviously for me, I have played a lot of basketball, but not at a professional level or anywhere near it. So for me, I would definitely be the play-by-play commentator, Cole. So yes, that would be the pinnacle for sure. I think I wouldn't be that great at it though. I'm really attuned to the pace of Magic now, and it would take me a while to get up to speed on how fast basketball goes. But I will say,
a while is like 2 weeks, by the way.
Yeah,
I give Marshall 2 weeks and he's there.
But the funny thing, I've always been jealous of those guys because their whole broadcast is like 2 hours, and ours is like 9.
Right? Yeah,
yeah,
cushy.
Yeah, exactly, cushy job. Okay, let's do a Crack-a-Pack, Rye, and I want to use this Crack-a-Pack as well because. You've been doing your stream over on Going Optimal. I know you've got your opinions on the set, and I want to, I mentioned this last week when we had Circovitz on, but, the audience has a pretty good idea of where I'm at with the set, and I want to kind of showcase your opinions here. So,
sure.
So first card out is actually a foil, and it's a pretty good foil to open. It's Organ Hoarder.
Organ Hoarder. Well, gotta love a first card common that, I mean, is this a good crack pack or a terrible one? Because right now the question is, what are the 4 other possibilities? The 3 uncommons and the rare.
Yes, that is true. And we have kind of knocked out the rest of the commons. So I will cruise through those, just to let you know what we've got. But then I will get to the
we'll talk about commons. It might spark my thoughts on the set. So we'll go through them. But obviously, Organ Hoarder in the mega lead right now.
That's right. So our first non-foil is Morning Patrol. That's the 2 and a white 2/3 Vigilance with Disturb. It comes back as a 2/1 flyer or something. I can't remember.
Serviceable, but I'm only really happy when I'm playing that in blue-white decks with a way to get them in the yard without dying.
Mm-hmm. Voldaren Stinger, red 1/1. It has first strike when it's attacking. You can pay 2 in red to give it +2/+0 until end of turn.
Never a priority, but if you do land in the playable red decks, it's a fine 13th, 14th pick that can get your aggro going that you then protect with spells and tricks.
Yeah, and I have found that occasionally the game goes long, you draw your 1-drop, and if you've got 6 mana, it's like, hey, this thing's actually kind of a pain.
Yeah, it is one of those weird cards that you ignore until you can't.
Right, exactly.
But it's also great with instant speed burn, because some people do math on, okay, they can pump it once, and it's like, yes, but you didn't take into account this extra 2. Bam, first strike, bam.
There you go.
So take down something huge.
Festival Crasher? 1 in a red, 1/3. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn.
The card that has made red playable. Can we just say that?
Yeah.
Like when Luis and you did the blue black show at the World, I was worried. I was like, oh crap. I'm glad this is a short season with this, because we might just be on another Forgotten Realms red-black thing in which this format is entirely warped around this one color pair. And I was very nervous, but we talked about the potential of draft to self-correct, and I'm very glad to report that it did. Both in a couple things happened, partly because of, I assume, the trumpeting of the pair on LR and other places. The community did start to really go after blue and black cards heavily, such that even if you're not in blue or black, you're in competition for those colors in general. But it also, the other thing that happened is finding, red was so maligned, especially werewolves, red-green werewolves as the lowest of the archetypes. But it started to emerge as people were realizing that the red spells were pretty good, and there were some red spells enablers. And hey, this Crasher, if you're casting a spell a turn, is like a 3/3 for 2, and you started to put it together, and then the red spells deck really emerged as a place for red to shine and to do well. And I actually love the red spells deck. It's fun to play, and it can be paired with literally any of the other 4 colors to success. So if you're going down a heavy red road, and you keep your feet and your eyes aware of other secondary colors, you can take a lot of little threads into second colors and then really figure out what your second color is later. And really, that spells deck has been my go-to kind of since about a week after that episode aired on Blue Black, because that was the point at which the format was being self-correcting and Crashers were wheeling consistently.
Yes.
Heck, Moonrager's slashes were wheeling consistently.
They really were. Crazy world.
In that world, the red spells deck was actually pretty monstrous, and I will take... I went from, I'm going to try and wheel this Crasher, to, I'm not going to take a chance. I am taking the most important 2-drop for my deck right now, and not going to chance it. Yeah. And red has been drafted more of late, so it's not quite as wide open as it had been, like, say, 2 weeks ago today, week ago today. But I think it's very exciting, frankly, that I'm able to say these types of things about the format, about where it was a week ago versus 2 weeks ago versus 3 weeks ago. Yeah. It is the community adapting and the format changing. So that's a good sign.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a long-winded way to say I love me a Crasher.
You say exciting. I say relieving.
Relieving, yes. Well, as a content creator playing this dang thing every day, I'm relieved as well.
Definitely.
But at this point, it's still not over Organ Hoarder for me. I'd rather...
right.
You're still looking to get into the red spells deck when the table says they're not interested. And then if you can be the only one in it, you can get a very powerful deck. But that's where the Crashers do wheel. And you're so I would definitely be thinking about the Crasher, though, throughout the first pack and wondering if I'm going to wheel it and wondering if I should hedge towards some red spells coming up in case I do.
Okay. Next is Stormrider Spirit. That's the 4 and a blue 3/3 flash flyer.
Filler 5.
Yeah. Timberland Guide, 1 in a green, 1/1 with ATBs. You put a counter on something.
Filler 2, although at its best when you care about Coven, and also second best when you care about fodder. I had a black green is another unheralded pair, which I don't look for or whatever, but sometimes the table says this is your lane. And I did have like the 3 Awakener, 2 Guide deck where going turn 1 Awakener, turn 2 Guide on Awakener, turn 3 sacrifice your Guide to attack with a 5/5.
Wow.
That's not bad. Oh, you drew a card, by the way, too.
Yeah, and it didn't cost you anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuffed Bear.
Stuff it.
Yeah. Bat Whisperer, 3 and a black, 4/2. If you hurt them, you get a 1/1 bat with flying.
I mean, the bat has done some stuff. I don't deny that flyers are valuable, even 1/1 flyers. But for two toughness, 4 cost creatures are hard to prioritize ever, unless they've got some unblockable evasive ability to them.
You mentioned the Awakener, perhaps best friend, Novice Occultist here. 1 and a black, 1/2. When it dies, you lose life, draw a card. You
don't even need a second color for that absurd curve out from the Awakener.
It's kind of the, that or Bait Hook Angler on 2 off after an Awakener to me is kind of the signature curve out of this format, just the. Crap.
Or I've done, if you can do it, the absolute best is startle their 1 toughness attacker on turn 2. That's the actual best.
Oh,
I've done that like once.
Man, just 2 for 1 city. Yeah, that's really
eat
good.
Your attacker, get a zombie token, draw a card. Oh, here's a 4/4, and I've drawn another extra card.
Yeah, by the by, so I'll have a full growth. Last common is Candle Grove Witch, 1 and a white, 2/2, and with Coven it gets flying until end of turn.
Nice staple for the white deck. It just flying matters. A lot of sometimes my good looking decks are, I don't realize how weak they are to flyers, and they fall flat because it's like, yeah, congrats. You're doing some powerful stuff there on the ground, Ryan. I'm going to fly over and get you. So they matter. And so even if this becomes a flyer late in the game, so many games have just come down. It's like you get the huge board clog and there's 3 relevant creatures doing anything on it. Yep. How many times has Candle Grove Witch been one of them? It's
often. Yeah. Okay. Uncommons. First one up, Dreadhound. 4BB 6/6. When it ETBs, you mill 3 cards, and whenever a creature dies or is put in a graveyard from a library, each opponent loses a life.
Good doggo. Fits in really well in the format in its color, because there's so many decay tokens that are going to give you. I've dropped this and had so many opponents scoop, or just known that I could not lose. It gives you that. It's that effect that death equals drain, or whether it's drain. Drain generally means you lose, I gain. In this case, it's just you lose, right? But death pinging. Is so you go from a board state that's like, wow, this is complicated. I don't know how I can get through here. This is what, and then you're like, oh, now it doesn't matter.
Dreadhound attack all.
Dreadhound attack all, no look, and you're dead, right? So that ability to just drain on death can take tough situations and turn them into clean wins. But it does have the same problem of any 6-drop ground creature in this format. It's expensive and likely to die to something much cheaper.
Yep. There you go. So you're still an Organ Hoarder at this point?
Yeah.
Same. How about Stromkirk Blood Thief? 2 and a black, 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, if an opponent lost life this turn, you put a counter on target vampire you control, and it is itself a vampire.
One of these days I'll call it a thief instead of a chief on stream, but hasn't happened yet. That being said, I liked this. I saw this as having a lot of potential, but I think it just ends up being hurt by the fact that when it does its thing, it's exactly what we talked about: a big ground creature that is nothing special. Like big ground creatures without evasion just aren't special in the format. This one's a little special because it ostensibly you paid 3 mana for it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's cool. But you had to work to get it to be big. So it just, again, another non-priority relative to just controlling the board and playing value creatures.
Okay. Well, we opened the best blue common. Why not open the best uncommon. Scott-Wrangler.
Scott-Wrangler. I was going to say best blue. I see. Because I was going to say that Opportunist is my favorite uncommon. Interesting question. I still that's a great pick between these two.
Yeah.
In the heavy decay deck, Wrangler is better. Question. I even Rising say better there because even then the Hoarder is so good. It's so better. Good though, right?
Yeah.
But Hoarder can't win games on its own. Hoarder gives you the advantage to find the line to win, to find the cards that do win the game, whereas the Wrangler just straight wins games with the, I've got 6 creatures, tap 2 things, attack with all. In a decay standoff, which is always so funny. Like, you've got 5 decay, I've got 5 decay, we've each got 2 or 3 real creatures, and it's like that's where this thing is unstoppable. Like, you didn't have any blockers on your decay side anyway, so block your handful of blockables and then send everything, right?
Yes.
So that being said, if you're not creating a lot of fodder, the Wrangler is just okay. And what I think is impressive about it is that it is still okay.
Yeah.
Even if you're not creating tokens and you are literally using only full-on magic cards to tap down things, the Wrangler still does stuff. So I might be talking myself into it, and it's also the cheaper option. But I love that Hoarder goes in literally anything and is linchpinny in some things. In anything that cares about the graveyard, it's absurd. Oh, here, let me take this spell and put 2 flashback cards in my graveyard.
I know.
So it just does so much. I think with the clock winding down, I'm going to scream out loud and take the Organ Hoarder currently.
Okay.
Only because I know that it is never going to be bad in any, like, if I have islands to cast it, it's splashable. Not that I like splashing these days. I think splashing, boy, that's another, bring me on to talk about splashing sometime. It's not really our topic for the day, but I'll TLDR it and say, wow, I'm way down on splashing than I used to be a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, splashing felt necessary because the cards were so bad on average that you needed some power. Now everything is so playable. Every time I stare at a card I can't cast in my hand because I decided to splash it, I just wonder what I've done with my life.
Right.
Anyway.
It's also, there's so much emphasis on things, like people get on board so fast now. Like you really need, it feels a lot more like Constructed, where like you really have to be doing stuff every turn with your mana. And if you don't for a few turns, you're going to lose. Like that wasn't always the case. Okay.
So I think I'm on Hoarder, but I wouldn't blame anybody for taking Wrangler. And I don't know I haven't looked at 17 lands on this or whatever to know if there's some.
Okay. Well, I can tell you. So 17 lands has Scott-Wrangler as the #1 uncommon, and it is higher than Organ Hoarder. So for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
I've got a rare here for you. Our rare is Tovalar's Huntmaster, 4 green, 6/6 that makes 2/2/2 green wolves.
Marshall, my viewers are laughing so hard right now because I have to now tangent to story time.
Oh, right.
So I stream at Going Optimal Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific. And on Fridays, we have what's called the Chat Gauntlet, in which I, instead of drafting against randos on Arena, I use mtgadraft.tk to draft against 7 viewers. We then export our decks into Arena, and we use the friend challenge system to battle it out on Arena. And I play each of my 7 drafting opponents in a best of 1. So I play all 7 in a best of 1. There are stakes involved. If they, of course, 4-3 wins the week, and we track win-loss records, and we see whether Chat or me wins the format after the format is over.
Okay.
But if Chat can 5-1 me, they get, or 5-2 me, they get a small shopping trip to the Bling store on Arena. We use some of my hard-ground
to burn some gems
on just cosmetics, Marshall. Don't even do anything.
This is painful for Ryan.
And then if they 6-1 me, it's like a big shopping trip. They get to really spend, buy a bundle of something or something like that. But 7-0, they get to decide my next haircut. Now, This is dumb.
That's really high stakes.
It's really dumb. But I am known to say dumb things sometime, and then I have to stick to them. Like, I was all full of bravado at one point. It was like, y'all never gonna sweep me. Heck, if you 7-0 me, you can choose what my neck, whatever. I just rattled it off. You wouldn't know anything about taking on-air bets or whatever, right?
No, nothing.
But anyway, so now I'm in this weekly contest against chat, and so far my hair has been safe. They have never 7-0'd me. They've gotten to 6-1, but actually won like in the second game or something. So it wasn't a big sweat. The biggest sweat I've had is 4 losses to start.
Oh God. God. Three mulligans into 2 landers that don't get there. And
Yep. And so it's always nerve wracking. I have 7-0'd chat twice. So I have, the first one, I used it as a, save my eyebrows. You can control my beard and my hair, but you don't get to tell me to shave my eyebrows. I have not, made a claim for the second win, but today what happened was, here's with a tangent. I first pick Huntmaster.
Oh,
like, all right. And it was like basically one of the only good, I think there was maybe a farmer in the pack. It was not a heavy green pack anyway. Took the Huntmaster and started going down a green path, and I was looking for what else to do with it. It looked like green-white first. As much as I'm willing to be green-red spells, I'm still very not interested in being green-red ground creatures. That is just doesn't seem very successful. Mm-hmm. However, this is about as good as the ground creatures in green get. So I took the Tolvar. And for all you who maybe don't know the card, it's the 6/6 for 6 that ETB creates 2/2/2 wolf tokens. And then when it flips to night, it becomes a 7/7 where you can pay 4 mana to have a wolf fight another creature. And when it attacks, you make more wolves. So it's right. Wolf Titan, it's just like it's crazy pants if it can get going. So I took that. We looked like we were green, white towards the end of pack 1. Pack 2, pick 1 was Huntmaster.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yeah. So I pick a second Huntmaster, and then the green red, we got a mid pack. What's the 2-drop uncommon Werewolf Lord? Flips to attacks and adds mana.
Oh, Kessig, whatever. Yeah.
Kessig, whatever. Then we got, I think pack 2, pick 2 might have been, or did we open it? Anyway, TLDR, we just get forced hard into straight up red-green werewolves.
This sounds amazing.
Where I don't want to be in the format.
Yeah,
however,
that part sucks, but when your card quality is really high, it makes up for a lot.
This is where we were just starting. 2 Huntmasters. Uh-huh. We add to the pile Tovar himself.
The naturalist.
Which we had to take over something awesome. In fact, Tovar, we still thought we were white. We thought, well, maybe we'll splash Tovar. Then the naturalist came later and no, okay, we're actually doing werewolves hardcore. Then we got, is it Augur? What is the 1 green, 2/3?
Augur of Autumn?
Yeah, Augur of Autumn.
Oh my God.
Look at the top card of your library at any time, play the lands, and at Coven, play creatures and stuff off it too. So we got that. And then, just as a kicker, was it passed or did we open? It was an early pack 3 pick of the 4/2 day-night Phoenix. The mythic.
Yeah, that card's good.
So
that's
we had
incredible.
2 Huntmasters, Tovar himself, Augur of Autumn, and the mythic day-night Phoenix to go in our red-green deck. It was the most absurd werewolf deck you could possibly hope to open. I was trouncing and also as I went into werewolves though, as we decided we were going into werewolves, I told chat, all right, if I can 7-0 you with the consensus worst archetype in this format, the bet's over. I win.
Wow. You put it all out there.
The hair bet is 1. I've 7-0'd you 3 times, and the hair bet's called, right? Mm-hmm. We go in. I am mowing them down. It is stupid. It is so stupid, Marshall. And all my bombs are showing up at all the right times. It's coming up Millhouse left and right.
Amazing.
It was just absurd. And then Timber Trannel Viewer Timber Trannell comes along in the 6-hole. I'm 5-0 marching with this monster pile. Oh my God, it was so good. He casts on turn, 3. I'm going to forget the name. You're going to help me remember it. It is 1 black, blue. Look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck.
Oh, yeah, the Siphon Insight or whatever?
Siphon Insight, yes. Siphon Insight. He Siphon Insights me.
He took your card.
Snaps it off. Just like snaps off the first one. I'm like, oh no. And then he untaps and he drops. And I'm kind of relieved, actually. It was only the 4-mana that werewolf 3/4 that pumps and gets first strike and like totally serviceable, excellent werewolf. Really, I mean it's good.
It's
in
a
any
good
red
card.
deck.
Yeah,
it just has the unblockable threat of activation, basically. Fortunately, he doesn't have any red though, so he can't activate the first strike. But still,
okay. I'm
just like, I know I'm telling chat he is going to activate this again. He is going to get a Huntmaster.
Definitely.
It's just not going to happen.
Right.
Like the only way you all are beating me today is with my own damn cards. That's clearly what's going to happen here. We go to turn 5. He casts he gets 5 mana, casts it again. Once again, snap picks. There's no pause whatsoever. It's like he casts it and he snaps it off. And I'm like panicking at this point. And we go to my draw step, and I'm at 6. I get to 6 mana, and I draw Huntmaster. I'm like, yes, we got a Huntmaster. I'm telling you, though, it's just going to be Huntmaster versus Huntmaster. Sure enough, Timber untaps, drops Huntmaster number 2.
Oh, my God.
And we have this Huntmaster versus Huntmaster battle that was epic. And ultimately, though, I flooded a little too much, and he played a little too well and got a little too lucky with the siphons and derailed me. I raffle stomped the 7th competitor. Sorry, Scullies. I told Scullies in my bitter tilt after losing my own Huntmaster, I am going to crush you, sir.
Yes.
I'm going to grind you into the carpet. And I did. It was like, but the whole time I was just like casually annihilating Scullies while whining incessantly about
not getting a 7.
So anyway, it was a big time fun on the stream today, and that's the longest way I can think of saying I take the Huntmaster here.
That's great. I love it, and I would too. It's tough because green's considered one of the bottom 2 colors. You've got the best uncommon in the set. You got the best common in the set here. In the best color, but yeah, I mean, Tovolar's Huntmaster is just pure raw power. And plus, it does go to what we talked about before where, if you can find yourself in any type of reasonable lane that's not one of the mainstream ones and you have a card like Huntmaster that just gives you a big advantage. So
yeah, that's where I would land on my, to tie up my thoughts on this format before we move on to more generic stuff is that I'm just really happy that it did self-correct. And I am at the place in this format where I will literally play any color pair that is open. And I'm really looking for the table to tell me what. If they're willing to give me the red spells deck, I especially like that one because it still tends to be very open and very gifted to you. There's a lot of synergies there. Interesting that green has kind of slipped to me into last place in the colors, but only because red has raised up, not because I've dropped green down. So I'm pretty happy that we're at a place where I'm willing to play all the colors. I still think blue and black are the deepest and strongest, and I try to end up there if the table's letting me. But mostly I'm happy that I am looking for the table to tell me what to be rather than looking to tell the table what I'm going to be.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Let's get into our main topic, right? I want to start with something a little more. We're going to kind of go back in time here and look at the arc of how people approached limited from a strategic perspective. But before we do, I kind of wanted to get your broad strokes on getting better at Magic in general. We can get more specific about like how people did it in different eras and where we're at now. And that's where we will go. But, I think that one of the things that you brought to the table on LR and set the tone with really early on, was this idea of the show having a practical bend to it, meaning that we're not here to theory craft all day at you, and then you sit down at the table and don't actually know what you're supposed to do, right? We wanted takeaways. We wanted things every episode that you could actually implement and help you get better personally yourself. But that also, of course, brings up the bigger picture on, what does it take? What is your view on, what people need to do to be able to be the best they can at this game? So give us your broad strokes on getting better.
My top line on getting better at Magic, and almost really getting better at anything, is the combination of other people and humility. You need other people to give perspectives that you don't necessarily have, especially expert. If you have other people who are better than you, that's even better, because you can lean more on their expertise in getting better at that thing. But especially, like, when I think about, I added the humility part, especially because of this audience and this crowd, not because this audience is particularly cocky or anything like that, but because this crowd tends to be longtime Magic drafters, entrenched people, really studying the game, really thinking about how to get better at this game, and really people who've been playing for years and years and years. And it's the people who've been playing for years and years and years that need the humility to continue to keep their mind open to other opinions and other perspectives, so that they're getting the most out of the information that's out there. So other people and humility, and a good, I bring up, I actually did my homework today, because I think I've brought this up on this show before, and I bring it up on the stream a lot, but it's really central to my philosophy about how I approach new formats, especially. And that's the ancient Indian fable of the blind men and the elephant, which is a often told Indian subcontinent fable about some blind men who come upon an elephant, and each of them is at a different part of the elephant: the trunk, the legs, the ears, the side, the tusk. And they're trying to understand what elephant is. And they're only doing it through talking to each other about what they're experiencing about the elephant. And so they obviously have wildly different opinions on what this animal is based on the part of it they're experiencing. And in the fable, often it's told where it leads to a fight. Fights break out over disagreements about the elephant, which I think is great, because it's like, that's so human, right? But that's the lack of humility, right? The not missing the humility piece is being at the tusk of the new Magic Online format, or the new Magic format, and deciding that it's all about the tusk. Because here you are, you're feeling it, you're experiencing it, you've been poked by it, you're poking with it, tusk, tusk, tusk. And then, do you have the humility to listen to the person who's touching the ear and saying, look what's going on over here? Or are you just going to be someone who's like, nope, I got it figured out, it's all about the tusk? And sometimes you might be right even, but you're not going to be right all the time. And having the humility to hear what other people are saying and taking their input seriously and reasonably is like, I think, step one to improving at just about anything, is listening and talking to other people who care about that thing along with you.
Yeah. That's kind of it takes a village approach. It's not like it's going to be difficult to do that on your own.
Right. Exactly. And there are ways, and I can get to that too. But I had written down, like, so you got, of course, first and foremost, friends who play. Hopefully you have live, local, physical friends that you can hang out with and talk strategy with, and talk, or even if you can't hang out live, that you can at least have the friendliness with to share your draft. You can send a link to your 17 lands data on the draft you did or the game you played, and have a friend look at that. If you don't have that tight local gaming community, good thing the internet exists. There's so many great online communities, including, I'm going to call out the LR Reddit subreddit is great. My Going Optimal Discord is great. I haven't hung around in the LR Discord. I assume it's great too. But I just told you the long story about playing chat in this gauntlet. Well, on our Discord, chat plays against each other too. People use the same tool we used to draft against each other on stream, to draft casually via Discord. So, talk about improving. If you can not only have a community of people you like to draft with, you then get to discuss the draft you had with other people that you drafted with. It's not even bringing in a friend to review your old draft. It's actually talking to the person 3 seats down about their perspectives on a draft. So make sure to look for those communities, content creators who focus on improvement, like Limited Resources and like my channel and like many others out there. And I say focus on improvement because there are plenty of channels who are just kind of there to have fun, or they're showing you high level play, but not really talking it through very well. I think that's a critical difference. Like, if you're really trying to get better, you need to be consuming content from creators who are talking about getting better,
Right.
And not just doing it, not just being good, but talking about how to be good.
Right. And that's something that I think that, people get attracted to with things like your stream and this show. Particularly, like when you were on it, when John was on it, even when Brian was on it. It's a little different now with Luis because, he does have that credibility that's through the roof, as far as his play skill and stuff goes. But, I've known every range of this, right? Of people who were really good teachers, but didn't really know what they were doing that much. So they were like kind of talking about what they knew, but it wasn't really that, their expertise just wasn't quite there, all the way up to, full on professional expert level pros who really had no idea how to convey a point to somebody else who didn't know the things that they knew, but were obviously really good at it. And there's definitely a sweet spot, right? Where you can be good enough or better enough than the audience, and then also have the skill set of a teacher, of somebody who actually cares enough to put themselves into the student's shoes and try to present information in a way that would be relevant and useful to them.
Right. Yeah, and you brought up Luis, and that reminds me, I wanted to call out, like, talking about the humility to be able to accept ideas from other people, and especially longtime players who feel like they're pretty darn good at this game. It can be tough to start taking advice from other people, especially if you think they're not as good at Magic as you. But I wanted to call out something I observed on your stream a couple weeks ago. Luis hopped on to stream with you. You were on his or he was on yours, one or the other. I was watching you two stream together. But I guess it was Luis's stream because he was definitely piloting, because this is why what jumped out at me is that you suggested a line and he declined it. He said nope, and he took his line and you kept playing. And then it was like 2 turns later where he offhandedly said, yeah, you were totally right. We should have done X. Two turns ago, and you're like, you nodded or whatever, and you moved on. It was not a big deal or anything. To me, it was a big deal, and the reason why is because that was a great example of exactly what I'm talking about from both sides. Luis is a consensus top 5 all-time Magic player, top 5 all-time,
right?
And you had the balls, the gall, the audacity to say to top 5 Magic player of all time, no, don't do it that way. Do it this way, top 5 player of all time. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it my way. Cool. You weren't offended by that, but you suggested it. And then 2 turns later, top 5 Magic player of all time says, hey, good Magic player, you were right. I was wrong about that thing. You are not a top 5 Magic player of all time, Marshall Sutcliffe. Right. But in that one moment, your Magic brain outperformed the Magic brain of a top 5 Magic player all time. Think about that. Yeah. It's like, it shows how complicated this game is, that at any given moment, you might outthink Luis Scott-Vargas. But also, it's telling about both of you and your skill sets at getting better at games. Luis is as good as he is because he's willing to hear you. He's willing to believe that on any given moment you might be right. Now he's got to trust himself, and he did. He heard what you had to say and took his line, and then later realized he was wrong. But he listened to you. It's not like he dismissed your line out of hand because you're Marshall and he's Luis. Right. He just thought he was right, and then had the humility to both keep examining it and to retroactively realize that Marshall was right. So anyway, just kudos to Luis for owning it, like seeing it, calling it out and saying, yeah. And hopefully and kudos to you for realizing, yeah, I get to suggest what to do to Luis because sometimes I'm right and he's wrong. And maintaining that ability to hear other voices has been so critical. It's been critical. Like I've gotten a lot better at Magic since streaming. And part of that has been realizing that I was a lot worse than I thought I was. Mm-hmm. There is nothing like having dozens, if not hundreds of people
it's
calling out every single mistake you make. At first, it was really tough on me. Like I had such an opinion of my game that I was always trying to find, in my head, I was trying to find ways that it wasn't a mistake. Let me figure out how to justify my mistake somehow. Like I can at least say, here's what I was thinking always. But I have grown so much more accustomed to just embracing it. Like first that streaming is hard, Magic is hard, doing it all together is hard. But that I'm going to get a lot better if I really start listening to my audience and pointing out these mistakes and start cataloging where my biggest leaks are. And even chat knows what my biggest leaks are and will remind me of them. And I'm going to still have those leaks when I die, I expect. I'm never going to plug all these dang Magic leaks, but I can make them smaller. I can make them make it less drippy. So yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think one of the other things that pops up, you mentioned having peers, right? Whether they're online or real life or whatever, that you can bounce these ideas off of. If you had to pick them, sure, they would be better than you at Magic, but whatever, right? Just, if they're enthusiastic and wanting to learn and in about the same place as you, that's totally fine too. But I will say that, listening to you talk about that with Luis and I, one of the really admirable skill sets I think that you can get, and it ties right into what you were talking about with humility, is the ability to put things on the table, but not stake your ego or your identity on them. Right. Like this is a similar example is last night I couldn't sleep and I was drafting the vintage cube and it was like 2 a.m. and I jump in and I draft like a kind of a crappy deck. Like I wanted to be Reanimator. I ended up being kind of a Grixis pile. It was a bunch of like playable Grixis cards, but didn't really have a strong game plan. And of course, my first opponent is LSV. Just totally random. He immediately sent me a text that just said LOL, and I'm like, oh, here we go. And in game 2, I had a situation where I took a very greedy line, and I got very punished for it. I lost the game because of it. I mean, I'm not going to quibble here. It was very greedy. I shouldn't have done it. I'm still not 100% sure why I did do it. I don't think that my thought process was like fully fleshed out in the sense of I thought, well, I'm going to take this greedy line because I think I need to, or because I have a good backup plan, or because there's a fail safe here. I just kind of did it, right? But I recognized pretty quickly, oh wow, if he draws a land here, he can do this, and then that'll happen, and then it was worse than that, right? It ended up just being like the full on disaster. But even after that, he beat me, and I messaged him, and I just said, GG's. And I said, yeah, maybe casting that Sphinx that turn wasn't such a great plan, right? And again, me being open enough to say, hey, I made a mistake here, right? Like that was dumb, and I recognize that the game hinged on that. But Luis also responded in a really, I thought, a good way. He said, yeah, that might have been a bit greedy, right? So he didn't pound me into the ground and say, well, you did throw away the whole entire game on that play. Right. He didn't like make me feel bad about it, but he also he wasn't like, oh, the cards you never really know, or, I had a good draw. Right. He didn't say that. He said, yeah, that was greedy. Like you pushed a bit greedy,
right? Bit greedy. Not slammed you, not ridiculous greedy, right. But you actually could learn something from that. Like, right. Yeah. And there's means greedy, but I see where you were going with it. Right.
Right. And the thing that is important about that interaction between him and I would have that same thing with you, by the way, is that there's a trust, right? My peers, the people that I'm going to for advice, I can say something like that, and I know that I'm not going to get windmill slammed back, right? That they're not going to say like, yeah, you suck, or that was really stupid. What the hell were you thinking, right? The type of stuff that makes you discouraged from opening up and saying, I think I took in a suboptimal line, or even just outright, I made a mistake, right? Or I didn't, or one of my leaks appeared or whatever, right? you need in your friend group and the people that are helping you out, you need the ability to open up a little bit and say, I don't feel very good about the line I took here, and have them handle it with a straightforwardness that doesn't let you off the hook. If Luis would have said, well, I had a really good draw, that's almost him saying, well, your line was probably fine, but I just happened to have a good draw, so you weren't going to win anyway. And that wasn't the case.
It's moot answer that's not that helpful.
Right. And that wasn't true. Like, my line did push. I could have taken a more conservative line that would have served me much better. And he's still recognizing that. And also, if I wanted, I could have said, here's what I had, and I could have done this instead. Would that have been better? And he would have been able to tell me why. He would, oh yeah, then I couldn't have done this, and you could have basically held this up, and I never would have been able to, and we could go down that strategic road. But even just the simple interaction that we did have, is indicative of the fact that I was comfortable enough to basically say I screwed that up. And he was comfortable enough to say, yeah, you probably did. But we were like communicating on that and not having it be a thing where, I had some type of attachment to it, where it affected my self-esteem or my, whatever. And that he also understood that that was the case and could give me that legit feedback. That to me is an example of humility on both sides, where he could have lorded it over me that he beat me. Right. And I, could have said, oh, well, you had a really good draw, even though I made a mistake that very likely cost me the game in my mind. Right. So, I think that really emphasizes that humility aspect. And if you can get to that with somebody and kind of make it clear to them that, like, this is not us just trying to measure who's better and who's not. We, like, in the case of Luis and I, it's very clear. In the case of you and I, it's not. Right? I don't know. You might be better than me. I might be better than you.
I don't know at this point. It was clear at one point. It sure isn't now.
Right. We're really close. Right. And, on any given week or any given format, we might have, it might be flopping back and forth. Right. And so, for me, that's kind of the, I would like to be able to do that with you, where you don't feel, and by the way, I do feel that way with you, and like with Woody and stuff, where I don't feel like you would use me opening up about a mistake as a way to prove your superiority over me at this game or whatever. And that's what you want, right? You want people that you can do that with. So again, to me, that's an emphasis on the humility aspect. Ryan, let's zoom out.
All right.
Because I kind of want to take our listeners on a trip through from the beginning of the game. We won't focus too much on the say first half of its existence, because it's interesting to note, but it's not really relevant for now. I want to talk about the tools and the ways that we approached limited as players. Okay. Now you and I were around for the beginning of the game, but limited wasn't really a thing. And then I wasn't playing for a long time. And then when you got back in for real, like, then you were playing limited. So, sure, we weren't really there when these sets were, for example, not designed at all for limited. We had cards in our hands, but again, limited wasn't a thing. So, but I'll still start off that first initial stages as there was nothing, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything. The first booster drafts were probably, Mirage, were probably just absolute train wrecks by our standards, right? Not only were the cards of much more variability as far as power level goes, but I assumed that people didn't even know how many lands to run in their deck. They didn't know that you should run 40 cards and not more than that. And that these decks were probably routinely built, well beyond the scope of what we would consider acceptable for now.
Oh my goodness! Even the top players, I'm sure the data is out there somewhere, or the tournament reports or whatever. But the early limited, the first set designed for limited was Mirage, and I believe it was designed for sealed. I'm not actually sure when booster drafting really hit its stride. Maybe I drafted Mirage. I think I drafted Mirage like at a shop once. So I guess draft and sealed kind of debuted that way at the same time.
Okay.
But there was a competitive event, pro level event with Mirage sealed. And if you look at those decks, you will laugh. You will feel like, well, I'm a pro because I can tell them what's wrong with this. You got people playing 4 colors, double splashing with no fixing, wildly incorrect land counts, people taking their ratios from their average aggro deck or their average control deck, which have extreme differences in mana ratios, and just randomly applying them to 40 cards. You'd call it a Wild West, but that, I don't know, Wild West, I feel like there's people actually getting, dying through bullets hitting. This is like nobody has any aim whatsoever. It's like, anybody hit anything yet? Nope. Keep firing. We'll figure this out.
Yeah. So that's the earliest stages. And then, as the fundamentals started to come into play where people, I'm assuming, were like, hey, we want about 40% of our deck to be lands. That puts us at about the 16 to 17 land range. 17 ended up becoming the default. I'm sure some type of game theorist came in and said, well, you should be playing 40 cards. You can play your best cards that way and maximize your deck's power level, that type of thing. So let's just say that started to solidify where we saw some just basic fundamentals, 2 colors, that kind of, this is, we are talking about this level, right? Getting people to play 2 colors, 17 lands, 40 card decks.
Pros running double splashes with no fixing.
Yeah.
That's what early limited was.
It's pros. Really tough. It's really, really, non-functional limited decks. Then where, I kind of start like the very tail end of this. I know that you were very much here for this. There seemed to be an emphasis on pick orders.
Yeah, there was a lot of discourse around, as people were trying to talk about, well, how do we even discuss limited? What am I doing to help you be better at limited? And one of the early pioneers in limited content was Gary Wise. He wrote for the Mothership. Also, you got to mention the Magic Dojo if you're going to talk about early Magic strategy. I really wasn't on that. I never was. You won't find any archival content from me on the dojo. I was more of I read these things called magazines.
Ooh.
Yeah, magazines.
Are those like websites?
It was like, imagine a bunch of pieces of paper, but they're all kind of stuck together, bound in a way that you can go through them in order.
So and like a website, but in real life, like you flip through the pages.
Real life website, except instead of scrolling down, you turn a page over.
Sideways website in real life. Okay.
It works. So I got most of my information from those things. So, fresh, hot information there when you're getting your month-old magazine delivered. But that's where the information was at the time. Either your Magic magazines, the dojo, or the Mothership, whatever daily MTG was offering up. And Gary Wise in his pick order lists was some of the earliest content I ever consumed on Limited. And I did the thing that made, I think, Gary hate his own content. I don't want to speak for Gary, but I've talked to him and listened to what he's had to say a couple of times, and I got a sense, this is a true thing I can say, I got the sense that Gary was a little sad that it all became about pick orders. Like that it's like, he's trying to be helpful, but he also knew that you couldn't just distill a draft down to, you take this card about pick 6 or 7. Like that's just, it wasn't quite the best info, and I think he kind of knew that, but he was also a pioneer. He was also one of the first people even trying to communicate something actionable to people at all. And so pick order was a fine place to start. And not even pick orders, because we get that now. Like you get even the pro teams deciding, okay, stack rank all the cards in the set for pack 1, pick 1, right?
Yep. So
pick orders are a legit thing. This was more pick ranges, where Gary would say, this is a pick 6 to 8 card, right? And that's where it's like, he didn't love how inexact that was, but I loved that it existed at all. Right? I was so happy
people were paying attention.
Yeah, or that even like I could take my own brain and compare it against something. Again, it's comparing your side of the elephant to somebody's side of the elephant. And even Gary's, something is lacking here. Pick order stuff at least gave me something to hold up my own thoughts to. And was so valuable to me.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. Right. And so you've got these kind of pick selection guides and then some pick orders as well, which, pick orders, like you said, they can actually have a use, but much like the guides, they really fall apart quickly. And that's the really tough part about things like this, is that these are really good examples of ways that we can have data presented to us that feels a lot more useful than it is. You get a pick order or these pick groupings put in front of you and you're like, ooh, I'm going to pore over this. I'm going to read it. I'm going to memorize parts of it. And I've got it down. I know what I'm supposed to take. I know what I'm not supposed to take. And so you feel like you've improved or like you're doing well. Then you sit down to draft and you open up your pack and you're like, okay, got my pick order. This is the highest card on my pick order. I'm going to take it. Great. That was probably helpful to you. And then by the time the third pick rolls around, you can basically rip up the pick order for the most part. Maybe it gives you a reference point on just raw power level, which can be a little bit useful. But as we've talked about, even in just during our Crack-a-Pack discussion, the rank of cards changes drastically based on what you've already got in your deck and what archetype you're in.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
So those just don't hold up very well as far as translating from the magazine article to win percent, right? I mean, our bottom line on this podcast is your win percentage. How often you win the games that you play. That if we can make that go up, then we're doing our job. That's our absolute most bottom line. And there's a whole lot that goes in between, but that's the thing that we're trying to raise up at the end of the day. Then this is right when I started to come in, you were there. And then eventually when we started the show, and that was when I started to see, and I think that it were a catalyst for this for sure, was an emphasis on card evaluation, as well as what we brought to the table, I think, was the kind of poker style game theory, game strategy stuff that also dovetails into these kind of cognitive biases, right? These mental tricks that our brains kind of play on us, or the way that we interpret data and stuff. And then also set reviews, right? Just the idea of individualizing every card and understanding its context, its power level, the use cases where it would be good, the use cases where it wouldn't, how often we think it's going to be good versus not, and where, all of those type of things. That was what LR tried to bring to the table. And I think it did change the way that people looked at Limited.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it could have been a broader group of factors, but I know that we did that at that time and that other people weren't. That was not the way that people approached Limited at the time. When we started talking about things like results-oriented thinking, best case scenario mentality, that type of stuff, those were not terms that were around in the Magic scene. They were in poker, at least some of them we made up for Magic specifically, but some of them were ports over from concepts that we had learned from poker. Yeah. And then I think you saw a different approach. It was more strategic. It was trying to look at our own brains and understand things that we may be thinking, or ways that we may be interpreting the things in front of us that are actually not helping us get better and maybe are even detrimental. And then, as I mentioned, the emphasis on card evaluation with the set reviews, which didn't really exist at the time. We did the first ones like that. People had written articles that were kind of along those lines, but it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't, we are going to talk about literally every card in the set in depth, and we're going to, really kind of dive in and figure out what's going on with the set. Now they're ubiquitous, right? Like basically every content creator makes some form of set review or another. Commander people do, Limited everybody does. There's constructed versions of it, etc. And I think that emphasis really dialed down on individual card quality and then seeing how they fit in context.
Yeah, for sure. And the card quality and context is an interesting way that you finish that thought, because that's immediately when I think about the flow of a draft, the front side is list-based card quality type scenario. That's why even the pros have tier lists for the entire set for pack one, pick one.
You need to know that.
That's the one place where even the time traveling supercomputer could come up with the list of absolute, yes, this is the correct pick out of this pack, pick one. But the pros know that it immediately changes. Like no pro is talking about, okay, let's do a tier list for pick two. Or it's like, because the idea, of course, would be, it's the same as pick one. But that's what I'm getting at. It's not, right? And it slowly slides away from that. This pristine, supercomputer blessed, perfect pack one pick order immediately starts to deteriorate with every new bit of information, every new pack you get past. And so that's why the trend from the beginning of a draft to the end of a draft is power-based to job-based is how I would look at it. So imagine you're the HR head for a new startup that needs a ton of people, like just a ton. and you got to get hiring. When you find, like, if you've got a bunch of candidates early on, you're going to be just looking at quality. We have so many seats to fill. Just give me the best people and they can take our first seats. Right. But then as your company starts to get full and you realize, we need specifically an experienced IT manager. We need an IT manager. I don't care that you are the best coder in the freaking Pacific Northwest. I need an IT manager.
Right.
And then, and so that's where you get job oriented. And then you start saying, it's too bad we missed on this incredible coder, but we don't need any more coders right now. We need to get somebody for this job. And that's how I think of Magic drafting and how it changes from the beginning of it to the end of it, and how card evaluation matters. But then you need to switch from card evaluation to job evaluation to deck evaluation.
That's great.
Right.
I love that. Yeah. And I mean, another good example to sort of show why the individual card quality or the pick order style thing falls apart quickly is, I think if I asked you, let's say I have a rank order list of the cards and you open up a pretty darn good one in the worst color in the set and one that's slightly worse in the best color in the set, right? There are meta considerations to take into account here, where if you'd prefer to position yourself in the best color in the set at a slight loss on this literal card to card comparison, right? That could be worth it. Like that could totally be worth it. Right.
Well, and certainly, I talk about the time traveling supercomputer as a way to talk about perfect magic, the concept of perfect magic. That's effectively what that is. But and it's a joke though. It's not a joke. It's an idea. It's a philosophical mechanism to think about magic. But the point is, it doesn't exist. So that if there is that if you do have a list, it's still some human who put that list together. And if it's two cards next to each other on a table, they're going to be this tiny, tiny difference. And actually, that's a little aside I'd like to make about agonizing decisions in Magic in general that I talk about on stream a lot. A way to let yourself off the hook a little bit is, like, the more agonizing the decision, the less win percentage it's affecting.
Yep.
Because
that's very true.
If you are just dying over the fact that this card is great and this card is great and you're not sure which one to take, hey, good news, you're getting a great card.
Right.
And it's like, the harder the decision is, the less percentage is probably impacting. If you're right that it is a hard decision,
right?
Maybe you're wrong, but I just think that's a funny thing about hard decisions. It's like, let yourself off the hook a little bit, and also let yourself have some fun a little bit. I think especially as spiky mindset players like us, if we had the perfect supercomputer generated pick order list, boy, just because card number 47 is one slot better than card number 48, if you're feeling 48 today, go ahead and take it. Like, don't be like, again, we're talking about tiny bits of win percentage in our hobby, right? So remember to prioritize fun is a little side note there.
Yeah, and I actually want to talk to you about that too. So let's bring that now to the current day. Okay, so we've kind of walked through each of the stages, and now we're entering and have entered the stage of data-driven analytics, right? Analytics. We actually have data now. And there's a few things that I wanted to talk to you about with that. And that fun thing is something we're going to touch on as well in a little bit. But, you as a person, you've got the way that you apply your intelligence, I've always really admired, right? And that's, I view you as a very practically intelligent person, right? You very much have the capability to be a theoretical thinker. I've had discussions like that with you. I know that is a part of how your brain works, but when it comes to this type of stuff, you have the ability to take the things that we have around us and turn them into actionable things. And that's, I think, part of the reason, why you're such a great co-host on the podcast was because it wasn't theory crafting. You didn't sit around and say, well, blue, black, and all these like ideas and theories that might even be true. You can hear this on a lot of different content creators these days about people that have their big ideas about how limited works. And it's like, it's kind of interesting. But when I sit down to draft, what does that mean for me? And it usually means nothing. And, so I'll call whatever this is like a practical intelligence, right? And I'm curious, from your seat, how do you view this whole data-driven 17 lands? I had Sirkovitz on last week to talk about this stuff. And you used to work on the arena team, so you actually had a viewpoint on some of this data from the other side. How do you think that this is the type of stuff that we can take and actually get better from?
I think there are things to take away from the new data reality, but it's also proving much more murky and hard to apply than maybe people thought or hoped once the data really started arriving. Once you had stack ranked lists of cards in front of you that you could be like, this is 53.2% in this category, and this is 53.3. Once again, does this mean...
And we have that now.
Yeah, we have it. Does that mean but the thing is, it does not translate effectively to, therefore, take the 52.3 over the 52.2 card. Like, it's still not that simple. And therefore, while interesting, it's not as actionable as maybe the spike in my brain would have liked. But it's certainly not actionable in a way that the game designer in my brain loves, because it's better for the game that it's still obtuse and hard to figure out despite all this information. I worked on Magic Online. I worked on Arena. I had access to all this type of data in the building, and I even left with some of that data in my brain, and I was trying to figure out how I could, even if I could decide, like, I didn't want to piss off wizards. No need to burn bridges in life if you don't have to.
Right.
But I was like, I realized, okay, well, I have data from, like, what if I wait till this format has rotated? It's not even a concern in limited anymore. They wouldn't care at that point if I talked about this like win percentage, card by card win percentage data that I have. But then I'm like, but what's my show? Like, what am I, so I can show people like, about the only practical thing I could think of besides some broad stroke stuff was to actually just demonstrate what I've always meant about rare drafting. I tell people, don't worry about rare drafting. If you call a rare on Arena worth 20 gems, because if you get 4X, it's going to be worth 20 gems. Rare drafting is a function of whether or not you think the common or uncommon that you think is good for your deck is worth more or less than 20 gems of win equity over that rare that you could take instead.
Right.
And I always had the position that the impact of one card on the outcome of an event was much, much smaller than people thought. And the way that commons and uncommons tend to be tightly packed around the average case, what is it? The average win rate of a user is on 17 lands is 54%,
yeah.
Right? So they tend to cluster around 54, which just shows that, like, no matter how good it is, like, there's just so many factors in a game of Magic. If you imagine that starting as a coin flip, and then every good or bad decision you make from the starting point of a coin flip starts to take you away from that 50%. There's so many decisions. Think of how many decisions there are from pack one, pick one to the end of your final game that go towards your win percentage, and then start to ask yourself how much can each individual decision really impact my and you realize, it's not that big. And actually that's where I came to. I'm like, okay, so I could use this data to show that there's not a huge win gap on terms of rare drafting, but how do I actually use this data to help people get better at Magic? And I actually, especially because I didn't have the data for new sets, it was just data that I could talk about existing, and I could talk about the relative spreads of things, but I didn't know how that helped anybody other than to be kind of interesting sausage making stuff. And then and I think we've learned now the world is facing that along with me. Like, I had that internal conversation with myself when I left Wizards, and now everybody's having that conversation with themselves as they look at 17 lands data and go, okay, well, what do I do with this? There's 12 columns here. Which one is which, if I look at this column, it tells me this card is better. If I look at this column, it tells me this card is better. What's the better card? And that's how it all falls apart. I think the useful things you can get from it, if you're going to go to data mining to try and get an edge on your competition, the best thing it's going to do for you is show you in broad strokes what the most the winningest colors are.
Right.
And that's pretty useful. Like because if I went into a coma and came out 4 years later and you're like, all right, Ryan, get back to drafting. You get to look at the 17 lands data of the set, but that's it. Then go in. I would just look and say, okay, well, like what's winning? Okay, green is winning the most. Okay, well, I'm going to see if I can find good green cards. That's going to be my baseline position. But then what do I do with it from there? And it takes data experts. That's the thing. And I love when you have data experts on your show, or when there's Two Duck Cube does a Twitter thread on some 17 land stuff. That's really useful to me. I say useful. I should say interesting. It's really interesting to me. But I remember reading Two Duck Cube's thread on Kaldheim. And it was fascinating. And it changed absolutely nothing about how I drafted the set.
Right. I feel like there's a lot of that, right? Like because I go to like what you said, if you go on 17 lands right now, and I just sorted by uncommon and games in hand win rate, and I went down to number 13. And of the 13, all of them are either blue, white, black, or a combination of blue, white, and or black. And then there's one green card in there. Right. So, and then the next one happens to be white, green. So I cut it off there. But if I look at it, that's 13 cards. There's no red cards. There's one green card. And that's including gold.
Right.
So, like that to me, when you look at a grouping like that, if you wanted the broad strokes on the set and you didn't know, that would tell you.
Right. And but there's a danger, and that does tell you the broad strokes, but unfortunately it does not tell you the details.
Not at all.
And it does not tell you when red is good. Right.
That's right.
So if I would almost like, man, I would not be able to turn down in that post coma world. I would look, it would be tough for me not to look at that data. But I almost think I might be better off not looking at it, because it's the kind of thing that you would look at and say, well, red's unplayable. Well, and then you'd be wrong. Like you'd be wrong, and you might miss the open red spells deck lane, when really what the data is telling you is most of the world doesn't understand how to find a good red deck.
Right.
So the real skill here is not learning that red is the quote worst color, or data wise the least winningest color. The real goal is to understand when you should still be red, and this data doesn't super help with that.
Well, I mean, this might actually exasperate it, right?
Right. I'm just trying to think, like, if you just were to filter to what the best performing red cards were, does that at least give you a look? Is that an accurate list? Is that a good tier list for red, at least? For example, I don't know, but
I'm going to tell you. So,
and that's because
I'll tell you what it says that they are, and you can tell me if it jives with what you think.
Yeah.
Just fun experiment, right?
Yeah.
These are the uncommons. Okay. In order: Thermo Alchemist, Play with Fire, Cathartic Pyre, Lunar Frenzy, Seize the Storm, and then it goes to Obsessive Astronomer, Flame Channeler, Voldaren Ambusher, and at the bottom are like the werewolves.
Right. Great. So that is useful. I mean, it's useful if you remember, it does not.
Well, it shows you that spells matter, right? Thermo Alchemist is number one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like the top N things there were either spells or the things that interact with spells, including even the flame channel or whatever, right? So it is nice. It is it would be a good tool to say, well, it doesn't look like red is very successful in the format, but the most successful red cards are spells and synergy cards that have synergy with casting spells. So that is useful. That is a good tip. Are you going to have the discipline, if you're assessing, the post-coma 17 lands data, to even bother checking the red cards, though, right? Are you just gonna be like, I got the format figured out, it's Esper, and if so, you're gonna be kind of right, but you're gonna miss out on a whole chunk of decks that could be the right deck for your seat, and you've cut yourself off from it because you've married the top line 17 lands conclusion, which is that Esper cards are the top.
Right. And so this is where things get really muddy, as you put it, right? This is where the human element comes into play. If everybody's relying on this data, then this data will stay true. If nobody's willing to push against it or try to find other things, then it won't. And if you're the first one or the only one doing things a little bit differently, that can go very bad for you, but it also is the chance that you have for the highest upside. Because if you're taking cards that you value or that you have determined have a higher value than the group thinks that they are, then you're the one who's actually getting ahead. Right. So that's a big deal. Is this good for the game? You know, I would use a comparison to Constructed, for example, where I think you can make a pretty strong argument that the fact that the Constructed formats get solved so quickly now, with how many raw number of games get played so quickly because of Arena, and the fact that, you know, I mean, if you go way back in time, right, there was a time when you could show up to a tournament or a tournament, and you would be able to play cards that the person had never seen before. That fairly quickly went away within a year or two. But then you could show up and play a deck that nobody had seen before, right? Your strategy, your ideas behind it. And then eventually that seems to have gone away. Now it's not really about any of that, right? Everybody plays decks that they found online. Very few people, you know, build their own decks from scratch. And if they do, they're usually not successful because most built from scratch decks aren't, even from the people who are really good at it. They'll tell you 8 or 9 out of 10 end up in the bin. And they were just kind of an idea to see if there was some meat on the bone. But now it's even more so that there's like tons of stuff for limited players and constructed players in the form of podcasts like this. Websites, 17 lands, articles, CFB Pro, right? There's all these different deck guides and stuff like that. And where it's really distilled things down such that, you know, if you're a fan of playing standard and the format's a month and a half old, it feels pretty stale by then. It feels kind of solved. There's usually, like, the best case scenario is that there's kind of a rock, paper, scissors approach where, like, you know, there's this circular kind of motion where one deck is on top and then the other two kind of, reconfigure to beat it.
The format always settles. Where is it going to settle to?
Right. It's going to settle, and you're hoping that it settles where the aggro deck's good one week, then everybody decides to beat it with the control deck or whatever, the mid-range deck, and then then the control deck's good after that, and it kind of at least is, you know, on some type of a pattern. That's kind of the best case you can get. And then, of course, it exposes, you know, weaknesses or problems very, very quickly. Are we starting to see that for limited, and is that good for us?
It's a mixed bag. If I were still working at Wizards and we were and we had some magical power to, like, really throttle this information flow exactly to the level we wanted it, and certainly they do have they could change things up constantly with their back end such that third-party websites just stopped working well with it. Like, they could sabotage all that stuff. So that on some level, we're hearing from Wizards by making it available that they think that it's net positive. I think the big positives for a company like Wizards it's the engagement factor. It's third-party folks engaging with your brand, making stuff for it, and then it's customers engaging with those third parties
deeply engaging.
Deeply, right? So I think there's a way in which the engagement factor is a huge win on the data dives, and getting us to go to these sites and spend our leisure hours thinking about how to be better at limited Magic is just good for Wizards. And I do think that the fact that the data, the self-correcting nature of draft, the metagame shifts, the table-to-table variance on just what's in the packs, and the hard-to-pin-down lessons from the data itself makes for much smaller negative impact on limited. I still think being able to 3 days into a format declare blue-black the current crusher is maybe not great. It's probably better for Magic if it took a little bit longer for us as a community to figure that out. But I also think you can't, I believe this about policing in general. Like you can't police human nature. Like if you can't police a thing, don't make it against the law, and because you're not going to fight human nature on that front. And so there's a way in which, if you put yourself in the spot as Wizards of the Coast as information cop, you're going to erode your own reputation with the fans who love you. You know, like if I have a good opinion of Wizards of the Coast in general as a corporation, whether you do or not, if I do, if one does, and then they run into what they encounter, they encounter what they consider to be somewhat of a dick move or whatever, that really hurts you, right? So you also don't want to come in like as the IP owner and start stomping on stuff and pissing off your community by being too uptight about everything. That being said, it is a problem, and it's a real one, especially, as you said, for Constructed. I worked on Magic Online, and at one point we worked with a third party. I think it was MTG Goldfish at the time. You could ask Saffron about it at one point. But as a employee of Wizards, I reached out to Saffron Olive, and said, hey, there's a data leak that you're using to solve, or not even a data leak. It was just like, oh, no, maybe it was. They were doing a scrape on results on Magic Online that we wanted. It was a loophole we wanted to close, and we were going to close it. But I basically reached out and said, hey, look, this is hurting Standard. Things are being solved so fast that we're going to solve this. We're going to close this loop, but I'm just reaching out to ask you not to use the loop while we close it. And of course he didn't have to. I mean, it was not it was not an order. It was a, hey, for the good of the game, can you not do this while we solve it? And I believe he complied and understood. But even shaving off a week or two off of the solving, like also Wizards itself was sharing 100% of deck lists and results, for example.
For the dailies and stuff.
Yeah, the dailies. And they throttled that back because here's what was happening. It's one thing, Marshall, if in a lower data world, we study the metagame, and I can come back to you and say, I'm sure of this, Marsh. It's a 5-deck format. Here's the 5 decks. You've got this, and this. If you run one of these decks, you're running a tier 1 deck in the format. Great. All right. So you feel like you have some choices. That was okay. That's fine. That's where Magic has kind of lived for a long time. In the data world, it moves instead to, hey, Marshall, here is a win-loss grid of the top 5 decks in Standard, how their exact win percentage against each other across all levels of play. And I can actually stack rank these for you and show you that this deck has a 55% win percentage, this a 54.7, this a 54.3, this a 53.7, right? We go down the list and there's a range of 55% to 53.5%.
Right.
That these 5 decks are above average. But now I've shown you the exact numbers. Which one are you going to choose? Can I interest you in the 55 or the 53.5, Marshall? Right, which one would you like?
I'd like the 55. Thank you.
Okay, so now you have one deck. It's now not a 5-deck format. It's a 1-deck format.
Right.
And the metagame around that. Are you playing the deck or are you beating the deck? Right. So that is a granularity and a specificity that really is a problem for constructed Magic. And I'm thankful that doesn't really exist the same way for limited. It's just not the same game. Because the decks aren't the same. When we talk about archetypes in Standard, and now even Standard decks aren't the same, but you can have enough overlap where it's quite clear that this is this kind of deck. Whereas Limited just has so many moving parts and so many different parts that it just can't be numbered to into the ground the way that constructed formats can be.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand what the best deck is in a limited format. That doesn't mean that you get to draft it, right?
Right. Doesn't mean it's available. Doesn't mean you just get to go pick up those parts and say, then I choose best. Right. It's like,
is this more fun? Is this fun?
I think it is still fun. Is it more fun?
I mean, does it make you worried that we're going down a road, like, because the way I view it is like time. Right. When the new set comes out for constructed, there's a limited time frame where there's a discovery process that's at play, where people are trying new stuff, where there's new cards that are being deployed. And that's what a lot of people get a lot of enjoyment about Magic from. That's why you see the most people play when the sets first come out. The cards are new, everything's exciting, and then it gradually dwindles down. With Limited, it's similar. To me, there's a window where the format is wide open and everybody's figuring it out, and everybody wants to know what's the best thing and what to do and what decks you can draft. And then over time, that gets more and more settled and fewer people play. Then you're left with kind of the junkies like us who will just draft anyway. But I have definitely felt like that window has shortened over time rather than stayed the same or got longer. And I do wonder if that takes away from the more just like zooming out, just the fun of it, right? Just the excitement and the fun, not the, not necessarily for people like us and our listeners who like to pour over, data spreadsheets to try to figure out what the best is. I get enjoyment out of that. I like trying to dial in and be, putting in some work to get better at a thing. But I don't think the average player necessarily does. And you can see that in the numbers. A lot of people just like new cards, new things, unknown stuff, exploring that kind of thing too. And I worry a little bit that the fun factor will go down the more we go down this road.
Yeah. Well, I think the game is going to be fun regardless. And I think the information is not useful enough to be that much of a detriment. To me, worrying about like big data ruining Limited is somewhat of an echo of net decking ruining Constructed, right? When the Doge, because again, you're talking about the early days, I could show up to a tournament with a deck that I had absolutely annihilated a different tournament a week ago with, and nobody at this new tournament has ever even seen it, right? Yeah. Complete mystery deck. And because that was the early days of Magic, people take what exists and say, this is what I deserve, or this is how it should be. And when things change away from the way it has been, I worry that it's bad. And of course, the big concern of net decking is it allows schlubs to win. Like that terrible player can now
As if
win.
That's such a bad thing, right?
They didn't earn a damn thing. They didn't know. They just grabbed somebody else's work and then used it to win. And my response to that was always like, if you're talking Grand Prix or pro level and you can't consistently beat a net decker, then what are you? You're not a good player yourself. So shut up. Like, what do you like? Who? You're like and also, let's get to the main thing. As much as us spikes love to express ourselves via winning and showing how that we are better or we were better this time today, this moment than this other person, and that's a big driver for spikes. We need opponents. You need the game to be healthy.
Yes.
You need someone to prove yourself against, and you don't want Magic to become a coin flip, but the notion that any of this stuff is pushing Magic towards a coin flip is just such nonsense that I can't even really worry about it. There's a little bit of extra data. No, there's a lot of extra data. I won't have to sugarcoat it. There's a ton of extra data now to tell you what is doing the best, to tell you what colors are best in draft, to tell you what deck is winning the most in that constructed tournament. They are not going to tell you how to sequence that complicated fifth turn.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I'm wondering that's the last thing I actually want to talk about for this subject is, does this, for limited play, create an emphasis on gameplay where if the playing field gets leveled out because everybody reads articles, listens to podcasts, checks out the data, has access to the same data sets now on 17 lands, etc.
Average card quality is higher.
Right. So there's an overlay you can get for Arena that will show you the rating that, in this case, it's actually Luis's written rating that he gave each of the limited cards. So like it'll say 3.5, 4.5, 4.0. And if you hover over it, it'll even give you the little excerpt of what he wrote about that card while you are drafting.
Right.
It gives you the number that he gave it. Like,
I use that overlay, except I turn off that feature.
Yeah. So there you go. Right. And it's like, it's one of those things where if everybody has access to that level of information, one of the best drafters in the world, and he's sitting there going, that's a 4.5, that's a 3.0, that's a 2.5, with no context, right? It's basically in a vacuum, for the most part. But that is equaling the playing field on draft, at least on some level. Notwithstanding the stuff that we did talk about, hey, these things change quickly and, you still have a lot of skill gap in draft. But let's say that it's done some work towards making it so that players before that just didn't have any idea at least have some handlebars now, or not handlebars. What am I thinking of? Training wheels, right? Where they can say
handholds. I think is what you were looking for.
Handholds, right. Handle wheels, like I said. And, and they can, at least have a basic understanding of what's going on with card quality without context. Does that put a big emphasis then on gameplay? Because this stuff does not come out in gameplay. Yes, it helps to have a better deck in your hands because, and this is something that has been kind of the secret part of one of my missions for the show, like with the cabs theory and stuff like that, which is that if you put a bunch of cards in even a player who isn't very good at the game's hands, where really all you can do with them is kill your opponent's creatures or cast your own creatures. It doesn't give them the option to make a bad play. They just go, okay, I'll tap out my mana and I'll play my creature. It's like, hey, that was the best thing you could have done this turn. Right. But so I do understand that does help with the gameplay, but gameplay gets so complicated so fast, and none of this stuff really addresses that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why these, I generally think that anybody who's worried about this basically taking away the skill test. I mean, that's the fear, right? The more data is available, the less this is about my innate skill, and the more this is about one's ability to research. But I would say a couple of things. First, what percent of, say, MTG Arena drafters do you think uses an overlay or has ever looked at 17 lands data?
Good question. I would guess 3.
Yeah, tiny, right?
Yeah.
Just a tiny percent. And then, I
do want to know the answer, but yeah.
The flip side of that, though, is also who do you think this is helping to the point that they're like getting wins that they shouldn't, like, or basically the group of players that looking at this type of data would help the most in terms of win EV are A, not in that 3%.
Yep.
And B, players you should be beating anyway.
Yep.
Like, right. Yep. So this is why I don't care about the data. The people who are looking at the data are already the good players. 54% is the average win rate of the 17 lands user. That's insane. That's a
really
lot.
High. Yeah.
That's high in a coin flip game, gang. That is high.
Yes.
So we are self-selecting to winning players using this kind of data anyway. So look, if it's you and me trying to figure out which one of us can leverage 17 lands data to get a slight edge over the other, that's not hurting Magic.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
That's fine.
That's we're more engaged. And
that's us being more engaged and us having more fun with our hobby. And the people who would get the best use out of it, A, aren't doing it, and B, you'd still beat them if they did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great stuff, right? And I'm really glad we got to go down the kind of memory lane, right, to bring us up, but also to go deep on what's going on now, because this is something that's occupied a lot of my mental space when it comes to the podcast and to how we should approach things, because, I don't want to be stuck in one place with the show, right? The show's always meant to serve its audience the best it can. And that means that we need to, adopt and evolve with the trends that are happening. And that's meant, that's why we have Sutcliffe on every show, every set now. And that's why, we reference 17 lands data, but also, I want to be wary of it. If you're, just simply looking up these numbers and sticking to them, I guarantee you're not winning as much as you could be. Like you said, it augments, enfranchised players' ability to win, but it certainly isn't the end all. And also, you mentioned it before, and I think it's worth pointing out again, is that we are still in the infancy of this. People are not good at interpreting this data. They are just not. They will simply take the data and then, sort of interpret it in a way that supports the things that they believed anyway. Go on Twitter and you can see it. You just can. I think one of the best things about this 17 land stuff, particularly early in a format, is to look at the cards that surprise you. The Lunarch Veteran is the one that really jumped out. There were still pros on Twitter who were saying this card is crap. I don't care what 17 lands say. This card isn't good, even though it was ranking at the number 1 white common at the time. Right. And it turns out that card is good. That card actually does have a home in the format, and it is a card you should put into your deck depending on how you've built it. And it's not because of its raw power level. In fact, its raw power level's kind of low. It's higher than what it looked at first, but it's still not like super high. But it has the effect that you want in those archetypes, and you'll usually play about as many as you can get. And if you paid attention to 17 Lands data, you should have been tipped off to the fact that that card's better than it looks earlier than other people knew, and you could have had an edge during that gap before the time when that happened and when everybody else caught up. That to me is useful. That's practical. That lets me sit down and draft better.
And it's not a super duper detriment as long as there's still this fog of war, which I think there really is. And listen to, take what you can from the data, have fun with the data. It's interesting stuff. But unless you are a data expert yourself, don't draw any huge conclusions without the help of some experts, really.
Yeah. And I mean, this is why I think people like Two Duck Cube, like Ryan Sachs, like Sirkovitz are people, who are positioned to have an outsized voice during this time because they actually understand how to interpret data and how to get practical, useful things out of it rather than just looking at a list. It's exciting stuff, though. I mean, this is really cool. I didn't think we would ever have access to this stuff, Rye. And like when you and I first started doing the show, I wouldn't have predicted that we would ever get data on this level where we can go as deep, and people like the fine people at 17lands.com who actually take the time and effort to mine this stuff, manage the data, and make it in a presentable form where you and I, on the middle of a podcast, I can just on the fly, list you off the top red uncommons in the set by their games in hand win rate. Like that is really cool. I mean, like you said, it makes her happy. Yeah, it's just really fun.
I like that the rest of the Magic playing world, especially limited players, are now having the exact same experience I had, early in my job at Wizards. It was like, wow, look at all this data.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
It's overwhelming. No doubt.
What the hell do I do with it?
Yeah,
exactly. Tell me. What do I do with this?
Help. Okay, right. Well, let's call it a show. Before we do, though, where can people find you? But also just like, what have you been up to? How's Going Optimal going? Are you still selling Magic cards? What's up?
Yeah, I'm still streaming Magic Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific at Twitch TV/Going Optimal. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Spain, and I am currently selling cards on TCG Player, but of course with Channel Fireball moving into the platform marketplace, or the marketplace realm. I'm totally looking into it, and I hope to be on CFB as well, have a presence in a couple places, but it's TCG is tough to find a specific link. You kind of just have to go there and you can search for a seller, and my seller username on TCG is Going Optimal, all one word. And hey, if you do order from me and send me a note, I'll send you my Ryan Spain rookie card. I have a rookie card. Yeah, it's true. That's from. I
want one of those.
Yeah, well, I'll hook you up. I'll hook you up next time.
Yeah.
So there's that, and that's all going well. The stream is a ton of fun. My community is awesome. I feel blessed to have attracted such a wonderful group of, especially core mods and core.
Yeah.
Core folks who really define what my community is, which is a bunch of people who would really appreciate what we were talking about in this episode, which is an improvement mindset, a shared experience mindset, a lot of humble people who are willing to be wrong about things, but put their opinions out there and see what other people think. And again, great Discord. Going Optimal Discord is full of awesome folks like that. So come check out the stream, 9 a.m. Also got a YouTube channel, of course, to catch the reruns and everything. So if you can't make it at 9 a.m. Pacific, you can check out Going Optimal on YouTube.
Okay, I'll make sure to put links to that. And it's weird. I couldn't recommend his stream highly enough. It is exactly in the wheelhouse of LR listeners. Ryan, you watch him stream, he's going to explain his plays. He's going to take ownership over them. He's going to tell you why he's doing what he's doing. And he'll even listen to chat and say, hey, what, does anybody have a an argument here, like, do you see any other, on like a close call or something like that? This is a type of open-minded discussion about plays that's really hard to come by unless you have, friends or people that you interact with a lot that do it. And Ryan absolutely fills that role. And it's weird because I just kind of assume that the LR audience, knows who you are and stuff, but it's like, it's been a really long time since you were actually the full-time co-host of this show. And like, I need to remind people, that like you built the foundation that this show stands on, and that the principles behind that are very much present in your Going Optimal stream. And if you're looking to get better and you want like like Ryan said, a great community and stuff, I highly recommend it. And it's 9 a.m. Pacific weekdays. It usually goes till about 1. And, there's a few drafts in there and then some fun stuff on Fridays too. So I really do recommend it if you're looking to improve, and I assume you are because you're here. Ryan, thank you again so much for coming on the show. We'll have you on again real soon. In fact, it may be really, really soon, depending on how things go.
I'm here for you as Luis enjoys his second round of fatherhood.
Yeah, I was actually saving you for a couple weeks from now. There was a scheduling snafu here for this week, but we're actually coming up on on Crimson Vow really quickly. And Luis is still very much in adjusting to baby mode right now. And I'm like,
are you asking me to the prom, Marshall?
We might be doing sunset shows. Like, there's like kind of our headliner shows are starting to come around. So, and those aren't great ones to have just like, hey, we've got some guest on, it's like, I want somebody who's kind of been here for that. So we'll see how it goes with Luis. It's really kind of about Luis, but
yeah, of course,
decent chance we have you come back on real soon. If you want to find everything related to the show, it's at lrcast.com, including every episode what we've ever done, including all of the old ones with Ryan way back in the day when we first started doing podcasts and had no idea what we were doing. You can listen to those. Again, at lrcast.com. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Ryan is Ryan Spain. You can, our sponsors, don't forget channelfireball.com, as Ryan mentioned. You can go there to buy singles. He's going to get his shop up there eventually. And there's a lot of shops that are already up there, and that gives you a wide range of singles to choose from. And of course, while you're there, there's still CFB Pro and all that kind of stuff going on. If you do end up buying something, if you'd use the affiliate code LR, I'd appreciate it. It helps out the show. Show's also brought to you by FTX. That's a place to go for really all of your digital asset trading needs. FTX.us here stateside and FTX.com outside of the US. Look, they're regulated, they're safe, and they're trustworthy. You can check out all the information on their site. You can also learn about blockchain-based technologies on their website as well if you're curious about it. It is a very deep and complex topic that has a whole lot going on. And it's definitely worth a deep dive if you're interested in kind of geeky, techie, computery stuff. This is a good chance to be kind of the next big thing as far as that goes. And I'd recommend it. I will once again say that if you do decide to invest, make sure that you consult a professional investment advisor, as I am certainly not one of those. That's going to do it for this episode of the show. We'll see you next time.
Hey, I got to sign off.
Oh,
I'm ready. I always think about these things. I had an interesting summer. I got put on a jury. I got on jury duty on a civil case. And, whenever you say jury duty, immediately what happens is everybody gives you the 101 ways to get out of jury duty.
Right.
As if we need that list. Here's the secret, gang. They all work. That list of 100 things, all of them work. It is not hard to get out of jury duty. All you got to do is tell them what they don't want to hear, and they'll show you the door.
Right.
It's not hard. So fundamentally, though, it's the system we have. I was curious. I've been on jury duty once before in a criminal case that was pretty short, but I was like, I'm one to fulfill my civic duty, and I feel like I'm a good choice for it because I stream and I ship magic cards. I can do either of those things anytime. I'm comfortable enough that I can take this time to do that. So I was like, sure, I'll do that. That is what I said before I found out that I got seated on a 6-week trial.
6 weeks?
6 weeks start to finish on jury duty, civil case. And it was interesting and agonizing almost in equal measure. I don't want to go too deep because I can actually tell you on my YouTube channel, I went on at length about my jury duty experience. And if you want to hear more, I'll give Marshall a link to that as well.
Yeah,
and you can go watch the YouTube video. But I'll give you the top line. So a firefighter sued the city of Seattle for negligence in their response to a 2016 fire at Seattle's Woodland Park Zoo. And the firefighter claims that he suffered career-ending injuries as a result of the city's negligence in their response to this fire. The city says, not only were we not negligent in the response to that fire, if you actually did get any injuries, at worst, you got a concussion that was fully healed within a couple of weeks. So those are the goalposts.
Okay.
On one hand, city saying maybe you got a concussion that lasted a couple of weeks. On the other hand, the firefighter saying you ended my career, pay up.
Uh-huh. And
really, I mean, I'm gonna clickbait you enough to say if you want to figure out how it actually turned out, you should go check out the video, or you can at least cut to the end or whatever. But the interesting part for me was just how looking at this process that we have, and as a game designer, you do your best, you take your shot at making a fun thing, you play it, and then you figure out where it's not fun and you change it. And I'm not saying our legal system has never been iterated upon. Of course it has. But it's one of those systems that's very slow to iterate upon. And so there's a lot of stuff involved that just doesn't make a lot of sense and is not likely to ever change. And it was really interesting and kind of tough to be be in the legal system as a juror, as a game designer, because I just wanted to iterate on everything.
Yeah.
And just knew that it was never going to happen. I think the absurdity of the jury-based trial system, this is how I came up with this analogy when I was talking to my mother about it, who's a former educator, a retired teacher. And I said, okay, Mom, imagine that you are teaching a class, and this is an important class, Mom. You have 12 students, 10 of them need to get like a B or better, or you will have failed at your job as a teacher. Because in this trial, you needed a 10-2 split to get a verdict. You could have two people who didn't agree. 10-2 was so okay. You got to teach. You got 10 Bs or better. But here's the deal, Mom. You don't get to. Your students don't get to talk to you. You do not get to test your students. You do not get to ask your students any questions. They don't get to, and you have to present your information in a series of Q&A with experts in which somebody else is going to nitpick everything you're trying to say.
Oh my God.
And now that's the legal system. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like as jurors, you're not allowed to talk to each other. You're not allowed and it would just drive me crazy. And so, okay, if you're a teacher in that spot, what do? Well, you beat them over the head with your lesson. You say the same thing again 20 times. You say it 30 times. You say the same thing 400 times because it's the thing that you need those people to understand to get those Bs that you need to have done your job. And so the whole process becomes this minutia exploration of these tiny, tiny details. And they go but also broad strokes conclusions that they say again and again and again. And it was like, there was an interesting fact, though, that as a civil trial, and apparently this is maybe just a King County, like more a local thing, but the jury did have this tool. We got to write written questions of witnesses after they concluded their testimony. So a witness would finish their testimony, the bailiff would hand out pieces of paper, and we would write our questions, be escorted out, and then we'd be escorted back in, and the judge would read whatever questions she decided were acceptable, that could be read. And then this was interesting to me as a game designer because I thought, well, this is how I could communicate to the teachers here. right? Because this is the one way I have to communicate with the teachers. Because a little hint, like from my perspective, the sorry, I want to say the prosecutor, but it's not the prosecutor. It's the, what is it? The
plaintiff.
Thank you. The plaintiff's attorneys never successfully argued to me what the alternative way to fight the fire would have been. They were claiming negligence in the handling of this fire, but I was never given by anybody, including their best expert, what the alternative would have been. And I was getting so tired because first they go like, were they negligent? Question number one. If negligent, did he suffer injuries that day? Question number two. If he suffered injuries, how much is he worth? Question number three, right? And with the way the trial is structured, they are presenting on all of that stuff all at once.
Oh,
right. Not all at once, but like you get all of it.
They overlap.
So they presume that you're going to find negligence and spend a ton of time trying to prove that he was injured and a ton of time trying to explain what his life is worth if he was injured. But all of it is moot if there was no negligence, right? So you end up with this situation where you're getting all of this information. None of it is relevant to the one thing. Like I found the crux. What should they have done instead? And then had nobody telling me that answer for 6 weeks. But
telling you a whole lot about the other stuff. Yeah.
How much a life is worth, how much a firefighter makes, what a pension is worth, what a concussion is, what a back injury is, all this stuff. But none of it was relevant because they had never, to me, answered the question how the fire should have been how the fire should have been fought. So like my other analogy that I have for the trials, the court system, is that it's like an NFL broadcast. It's a broadcast of an NFL game. It's a 5-hour affair in which there is a pre and a post. There's 3 hours of actual game broadcast time. For 1 hour of actual clock time. And of the 1 hour of actual clock time, there's only 11 minutes of actual snap to whistle. And of the 11 minutes of snap to whistle, there's maybe 1 or 2 minutes of plays that actually produce a score that changes the outcome of the whole thing.
Oh my God.
Right? So you go from the 5 hours is condensed to a couple minutes of impactful moments. And that's the NFL for you, right?
That's funny.
And that's also, unfortunately, our court system for you, where I was sitting through so much.
Hours and hours.
And hours.
Days
and weeks.
Of your productivity just evaporating.
Yeah, and of course, like, here's the thing. Like, it's half, the plaintiffs go first, and then the defense goes second. So we're 3 weeks into the trial. The plaintiffs are closing in on resting. They still haven't even convinced me that they're right. Like they're already like I could make the defense's case for them. I was like, it's like if the defense attorneys got hit by a bus coming in, I'd be like, hey, put me in, coach. I got this. I'm ready. And instead, so it's like the plaintiff's case has spent 3 weeks teaching me how to read, teaching me how to write, teaching me how to construct sentences, teaching me how to tell a story, teaching me how to write a book. I can now write a book after the plaintiffs do this thing. And then the defense attorneys, with no ability to talk to their jury, basically come out and say, okay, everybody, the alphabet. And I'm just like, no.
Oh my God.
And so it was in many ways kind of torturous, but it was super interesting. And there's a lot of other great stories from that. We had a problem juror. We had a juror get thrown off the jury because she was too she could not. She was like not OCD, more like hyper. Like she seemed like she had ADHD and couldn't. Anyway, just all sorts of crazy stories from that whole affair. But at the end of the day, it's quite a system we have, and I got through it. And I would, if I ever get called for jury duty again, I'm going to say, look, 6 weeks, I'm done. You don't get me anymore. I'm done.
Do you regret
No, I don't regret
playing the game of getting out of it.
No, I don't regret it, and I don't think you should.
I don't either.
I play it like. Hopefully, you'll never be on either side of the courtroom in terms of plaintiff defense or defendant prosecutor, because that's obviously bad. Because you just don't like. I wouldn't want to sue anybody. I don't want to be sued. I don't want to be in a courtroom again. But if I am, who do I want as jurors? I want people like me, frankly.
Rational thinkers.
So I'm not gonna. I'm gonna behave how I would want others to behave if I were the one coming into that courtroom and doing my duty, as they say.